You are now listening to Asking for a Friend with TalkDoc, sharing insights through real, honest, and practical ways to improve your communication and relationships. Featuring your hosts, Dr. Pamela Kreiser, Meredith Edwards Nagel, and Teighlor Polendo.
Our aim tonight is to discuss differences between direct and indirect communication and trying to understand why you would choose one or the other, why you would lean into one or the other. And doing some research and learning about this, I wanted nothing more as a woman in her 30s, personally, professionally, to only move in the direct communication route, because I believe what we want to do here is be clear in our communication. And I think ignorantly thought that that was the only way to do it. But I'm excited to learn that there can be options for indirect that don't necessarily take away the clarity of your communication.
We read an article by Cynthia Joyce from University of Iowa on the impact of direct and indirect communication. We'll put it in the show notes. She has this great chart to show some of the differences between direct and indirect communication. So what I thought we would do is take each of them and then talk about which we preferred.
Yes.
Direct communication sounds like this. Tell it like it is. The facts speak for themselves. Indirect communication says, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything. Tell someone what you think they want to hear. Which one do you pick, A or B?
I for sure say A on this one.
I like the second. If you don't have anything nice to say, you don't need to say anything. But I don't like the second part of it of tell someone what they want to hear. I don't like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you don't have anything nice to say, you shouldn't say anything mean.
Yeah.
Meredith did teach me, though, sometimes not saying anything can be just as rude as saying something.
I don't know what I was telling you.
So it was very applicable for the moment, and it made sense.
For the moment, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. So next pairing, direct communication, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And indirect communication, the nail that sticks out gets hammered back in.
I think squeaky wheel gets the grease.
I think I like that one, too. What about you, Mare?
See, I kind of like both of them. Can I do that? Can I cheat? I want to be the squeaky wheel. I like that. Like, the competitive nature of me is like, yeah, like go for that one. But yeah, I don't know. That one I felt kind of even on.
Okay.
Next one. So direct communication, A, honesty is the best policy. B, I think this one's going to be hard for Teighlor. B, indirect, being polite is more important than being honest.
That's so a hard difficult. No. I have to go with A.
You have to.
I knew there was going to be polar opposites for you two on this one.
Does that mean, though, that you're lying? Because I don't agree with lying, but sometimes I'll go back to the other one. And if I don't have anything nice to say, I'm just going to withhold the truth and say maybe you've looked better or, like not say anything.
Yeah, I just, of what I know of Teighlor,
say
honesty is number one in your life. Do not lie.
Yeah.
But then to be rude and not polite to somebody would just crush you. So
I'm just going to keep my mouth shut if being honest is rude.
So do you pick one for this, or would you go direct or indirect on this one, Tay?
I think that I'm not going to lie, but I think I'm going polite. Like, I'll just keep my mouth shut and not say anything and go polite over, like, if it's going to be hurtful. It depends. Like, it so depends on what it is, right?
Yeah, sure.
Sometimes people need to hear the truth. I don't have a problem with that. But if it doesn't do anything, like if it's not going to benefit them, then there's no point in saying it, in my opinion.
Yeah. I go honesty, best policy, because I think eventually it's going to come out. It's just my thought. Yeah. Eventually the truth always finds its way.
Yeah.
The truth will set you free. Anyway. Okay, do the next one.
Okay, direct communication, it's okay to say no. Indirect, avoid saying no. Say maybe or possibly, even if you mean no.
Wow.
Okay, me in my 20s, I'm saying maybe I can come. Maybe I'll be there. I might go out with you, for sure. The first time I read that, I was like, ooh, that's me in my 20s. Me now, I can say no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The closer you get to 40. The 40 is when you live the word no.
Ooh, I like it.
Beat you there, though, Teighlor.
Just barely.
Everything's a competition on the podcast.
I know, that was so silly. Next one, I'll read this one. Direct communication. The truth is more important than sparing someone's feelings. Don't beat around the bush. Indirect. If the truth might hurt, soften it.
And I'm going indirect here, folks. I know.
Oh, I knew it. I was going to call you out first.
Gotta soften it. Gotta soften it. Too harsh.
Because again, that's not being dishonest.
No.
Yeah.
It's still being
You
truthful.
just have to feel less of the weight of the truth. Maybe soften it up a bit.
Yeah.
I like that.
I like that too. Who wants to read the next one?
Okay, direct communication. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Indirect. Read between the lines. I'm going to go direct.
Hard A for me on that one. Direct.
Yeah, I'm going to go A, but I
it-
do think communication demands that you read between the lines sometimes.
But isn't that where we start assuming a bunch of things and we get all types of miscommunication? Is by filling in gaps?
We could.
Then you do perception checks. You go back to that episode.
Yeah.
Next one. We had 3 left. Direct communication, take communication at face value. Indirect, handle communication to save face.
I live more like the first one.
Yeah, but then you're missing read between the lines.
I know. I'm just saying how I live. I live more towards taking communication at face value.
Yeah. I think I like that too. I remember telling my spouse, just go off the words I'm saying. And if you think that's not accurate, you can always check in with me. But I didn't want all those funny jokes about like, well, she said this, but she really means this. Like, I don't want that. Go off my words. And if you need to check in on that, we can, but I like the face value.
I was going to laugh at that one because when I first read it, I wrestled with it. But now I can think of, toddler life. Oh, it's just face value. I don't have the time or the bandwidth to go much past that at the moment. All right, the last 2. Who wants to take them?
Sounds very American. Time is money,
Sure.
get to the point. And the indirect version is small talk before business is important. We like them both.
Okay, let's look at this last one. Direct communication. It's okay to disagree with your boss in a meeting. Indirect. Criticism of others, especially people with more authority, should be unspoken or careful and veiled.
Depends on the boss.
Interesting.
It's hard because I feel like I don't agree with either one of these.
Yeah.
But I can see why, if a person is of authority in a professional setting, you can address something outside of that setting with them. Versus, I don't agree that things should be unspoken or veiled.
Maybe it's just the at the meeting part. Maybe that's something you don't really want to disagree with anyone in a meeting. Maybe that's something you want to do privately. So I don't love criticism. That doesn't seem like a productive word there.
Well, you could get into blindsiding. That's where I think it goes the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Where some boss could be thrown off or look bad or feel attacked because
Yeah.
there's a public audience. Let's differentiate direct and indirect communications. We know that anyone can do any behavior anytime, but someone who is communicating directly tends to say what they think. They tend to convey with their words what they're saying. This is very commonly done in low context cultures, and those are cultures that value individualism, independence, or self-reliance. These are behaviors that someone in those cultures might more likely engage in. Just say it how it is, right? In contrast, indirect communication is a common feature of those cultures that are typically opposite, that are high context culture. So the meaning is conveyed not just by the words, but by also the nonverbal behaviors that accompany those words. When we're talking about just a quick review of low and high context cultures, when we think about how much the context matters or dictates the meaning in the message, in low context, the meaning in the message is created by the individual actor. In American culture, we tend to favor directness, honestly, because we see it as the way to be, because we stand for things like individualism. Different from that is high context culture, where individualism isn't necessarily valued. It's the collective or the high context culture that matters more. And so we might see in a culture like that indirectness is favored above directness because it's seen as better for the common good.
Yeah, I feel like you kind of cleared up there why my gut in getting ready for this was like, why did I want direct so hard?
Yeah.
And it's maybe just ingrained in me culturally as a part of that. I wanted that to win or something, right?
Right.
Something can be learned from indirect communication style, I think. I want to be clear in my communication. I want to minimize misunderstandings, right? I want to encourage clarity, but I do think indirect communication seeks to keep things harmonious.
I was thinking in prepping for this example that I saw years ago. It was a student who was interviewing for jobs and was coming from a high context culture. I think maybe Japan she was from. And she was being interviewed by an American company. And the American company said questions like, what have you done personally that makes you qualified for this job? What are your experiences? What are your education, right? All the questions. And her answers were all not what the American wanted to hear. For example, they said, you have excellent grades. You're a great student. And the student who was interviewing from the high context culture said, I have great teachers. And they said, but don't you see yourself as highly skilled? I see that my skill has been improved by the experiences I've had. It just doesn't sound the same.
Yeah.
It does not sound the same.
Interesting.
And so what was funny about that video, it was illustrating how we might have a missed opportunity entirely for a great performer in a job if we don't get those differences. We might pass on somebody who's the best person for the job.
Yeah. And you talking about this example reminds me of back in episodes 27, 28, and 29 was a series that we did on this podcast about the dance of visibility and clarity in your communication. And we did some conversation there more about workplace. If you're interested, go back and check those out.
So Meredith, you had some stats like based on the United States that not all parts of the United States necessarily favor directness equally.
Yes, that was through that article, the research from The Impact of Direct and Indirect by Cynthia Joyce, the University of Iowa. They talked about that people assume Americans are naturally direct communicators, but there's a lot of variation because of our regions, our cultures, our families of origin, things like that. West Coast, East Coast, tend to be super direct, even almost harsh in some ways. And those from the Midwest and the South tend to be more indirect in other ways, right? Like, oh, bless your heart. Or you think of all these like different phrases. That's kind of what came to my head when I read that. I was like, oh yeah, interesting. And living in the Midwest now, a little over a year, coming from the West Coast, I do feel it a little bit. I feel like, I'm like, am I coming across harsh? Is that like what's happening right now? But I do get a sense of that sometimes, even just in public. So I was at Costco, which is my favorite place to shop. Guilty. I love Costco. And we'd only been living here for a few months in the Midwest. And I bought a box of diapers and a box of condoms. And there was like in her 60s, 70s-year-old woman at the register. And I was laughing because I was like kind of uncomfortable. And she puts it through and she's like, how's your day? And I was like, well, I love the first one, trying to prevent the second. And she just like looked at me with her eyebrows and just looked straight down. And I went, oh, wow. Am I not in California anymore? Is that maybe not okay to say that? I came home and told my husband and he was just like, oh my God. Anyway. Did I ever tell you guys that story?
Funny. No, but I wonder if she even looked at the things and she was just asking you how your day was.
And she knew what I was talking about. She was in the middle of getting the diapers went through and the next thing was next. And she was not happy with that comment. And then I got very myself and awkward and my alter ego came out and I couldn't stop talking. And I was like, no, I love her like so much. I'm just kidding. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. It was so bad.
So you just did the classic throw more words. Just throw them on the pile.
Oh, I was sweating. I mean, it was bad. I just wanted to get out of there as fast as I could. But then I couldn't help but laugh after. I didn't feel like I belonged where I was for a moment. It just reminded me of this. Okay. I really loved the strategies research on relationships with direct and indirect communication. So there is ghosting, orbiting, or complete rejections, which is variables from indirect to direct communication. And the ghosting and orbiting are definitely indirect forms of communication, right? So ghosting refers to basically abruptly, just totally cutting off communication with somebody, right? It's typically in the context of dating. Response. Just nothing. There's no explanation, no warning. It involves things like ignoring messages, text messages, ignoring calls, or any other forms of contact. Basically, you disappear. You turn into a ghost without closure or resolution. So to me, that's total indirect. I'm thinking, oh, if I haven't heard from you after like 2 weeks, like, okay, you've ghosted me. I'm done. I'm moving on. But some people might, have a longer time frame for that. It feels so not clear to me. Then the other one is orbiting. So it's like orbiting is circulating around something, right? Is that a way to say that?
I've never heard of this one.
Yes. According to my research, orbiting is a dating trend that describes a situation where someone from your past, often an ex-lover or a person with whom you once shared romantic feelings, maintains a presence in your life, primarily the online sphere, without engaging in meaningful interaction.
The conversation goes, oh, I know maybe we're not lovers, but I still want to be in your life. Like, you're really important to me. We could be friends. I'd love to support you, but then maybe going to group settings only and like liking your pictures and commenting on things. Taylor's like,
you don't need that many
ghost
friends.
Me.
So.
Taylor's like,
I think it's way more clear. Just never talk to me again. It's pretty clear to me.
Yeah, that's true for you. I love that. And then the other one is just complete rejection, right? But they can vary from being indirect to direct in the communication. Okay. I thought it was interesting. Basically, there was research that said an immediate I'm breaking up with you right now might be too direct, but you just need that, hey, we need to talk, as a buffer. And the researcher was saying it's just that couple of seconds that gives someone to process, oh, okay, this is happening right now. And then immediately deliver. Be clear in your delivery. So, anyway, do you want to talk about that a little bit more? Because I
want to do a quiz.
Okay, you're not actually going to give us a quiz, are you?
I'm actually going to give you a quiz.
Oh, okay.
It's a special day. But I have two.
I think we're both too
questions.
pregnant for this.
Okay, warm-up questions. You ready? This is a warm-up. Practice. And get ready. Okay.
Okay.
What percentage of people will experience a breakup in their lifetime?
90%.
85%. So you're pretty good. You're warming up.
Okay.
Well, some stay together.
That's why I said 99.
They get together with someone, they stay together, right? 99. So you're just everybody? Okay. All right. This is a second warm-up question. Which day of the week is the most common for a breakup?
Oh my gosh.
Wednesday.
I want to think that like people do it right before they go out and party all weekend. But I'm actually going to go with a Monday because I think that was the last time I broke up with someone was on a Monday.
And Monday is correct. Very nice on the warm-up. All right. So now on to the quiz. What percentage of people prefer to break up in person?
Hopefully everyone.
I'll say 40.
The answer is 57.
I would win that.
I think you win that, Meredith.
My
That's
math,
right.
my
So
maths
Meredith's got one.
are correct.
Do you need your calculator?
I think I'm good. I think I'm ready.
Okay. Second question. What percentage of people believe that texting is the most undesirable method for breaking up? So texting the breakup.
77.
54.
Taylor wins that one, 37%. Say it's the most undesirable. Okay.
That low
And
of a
then
percentage? Think is undesirable?
I know. I thought it would be higher.
More
Yeah.
people don't think that they want to be broken up with by text? Okay.
I mean, I imagine that number has grown over the years.
Yeah. Are we
That
including
sounds
like high schoolers in
horrid.
these polls?
Yeah.
Even though the age frame we're dealing with.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm like, we're
Like
engaged,
100
and
years
he's
ago?
just like, no thanks. It's over. I need more of a text.
You got to
I
be
don't
in
know.
person so you can throw the ring.
Oh,
you
you're
yell
right. No,
and
you
throw
keep
the ring
it.
at
You
him.
keep-
You sell it
Keep
and
it.
go on vacation.
Yeah, with me.
Wow.
We're just kidding. We're ruthless.
Okay, so now we've been talking about directness and indirectness. What percentage of respondents agreed with the following statement? Negative feedback, if delivered appropriately, is effective at improving performance.
How many people thought that was true?
How many people agree with this assertion that negative feedback, if delivered appropriately, is effective at improving performance?
70.
68%.
68 for Taylor. And what'd you say?
Yeah.
70.
And the answer is 92, actually.
Ooh.
High degree. So that is interesting related to our topic of directness.
Yeah.
because negative feedback, if delivered appropriately, seen as improving performance. So congratulations, Meredith.
Okay, and that all points to, which is like the biggest thing I want to say in this episode, if you're breaking up with someone, be honest, right? That's what that is saying. That if you can be direct in a nice way, you don't have to be rude about it. But if you could break up and be honest as to why you're breaking up with someone, they could either say, no, I'm good, I like myself how I am, or oh, maybe you have a point and there's an area I could work on. That most people, 92% of people agree with that statement.
The negative feedback? I don't know if negative feedback was meant to be with the breaking up thing.
Yeah, I was going to say.
That's
more
where I
seen
was
as
taking it.
Oh, no, more
you were?
professional.
I'm thinking
I
of-
took that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I took that way more. Because someone's going to break up with me negatively. Like, I'm just going to be like, you're not going to be with me ever again.
No,
So-
not in a, they're just saying like, here's why I'm breaking up with you.
I understand what you're saying, Taylor. Like, oh, here's a reason. If you want to, if you want to improve yourself, I think you got to read the room. Like, are you really trying to help that person improve their life at that stage? Or trying to leave them? Do you care? Does that person care to change that parts of themselves?
Doing
Trying to, like,
no one a favor if you're not honest in a breakup situation. That you need to be honest.
who do you need to do favors for? I just don't want to be with you anymore.
I don't think it has to be rude or mean or malicious. Like, don't do it in a nasty way. But I think that no one improves and no one gains any clarity if everyone's like, you're wonderful. It's me. It's not you. Whatever their line is. I just need to be single right now. So just be honest with them, because it's so annoying if you don't have any clue as to why this keeps happening to you.
I mostly agree with you. I also know what it feels like to not want to be with somebody I'm dating, and I don't know like how to put my finger on it, but I just know I don't want to live my life with that person like in that fashion anymore. And I can think of the person I dated right before my husband, which was a super fun guy.
Yeah.
But I just didn't really want to live the life he was living. And I couldn't see myself staying there. And I wanted different things.
And so in the breakup, did you say those things? Because then he knows like, oh, it's nothing I did to her. It's just I chose this life and she doesn't choose it.
I think I was more indirect than I probably wish I was. I wish I was a little clearer in that time. But I think I remember saying something to the effect of like, I feel like our lifestyles are very different. And I'm moving in a direction that's taking me somewhere just different than where your life's at. And I don't see that aligning.
I feel like if Taylor had her own podcast, she would just be a breakup advisor. Like, you come on,
Right.
tell me, I'll tell you how. Yeah, we're just going to be honest. We're going to be respectful, but we're doing it. A professional.
She's
breakup
like the
advisor.
next like Ryan Seacrest. She doesn't like call for flowers. She's like, this is happening. We're not doing this by text, honey. Get together. Let's.
No.
That's right.
Fun fact, I've never broken up with someone.
They've always
just
broken
been-
up with you?
Yeah, I engage the conversation. Here's a problem that we need to fix, or we can't stay together kind of thing. And they choose the not stay together. And I'm always, oh, let's fix it. But yeah, that's cool too.
Oh, I'm glad they all didn't want to fix it. You got the gem at the end. You're good.
Oh, I know.
As a side to this bad news, the research also mentioned about delivery of medical bad news, which I found was totally different than relationship. Basically, participants overwhelmingly reported they didn't want any buffer. No buffer. Doctor, get straight to the point, right?
Yeah.
If there's no buffer desired or required.
Right.
And I love that he said in here, he said, if your house is on fire, you just want to know and get out. That's the medical bad news quote, right? If you have cancer, you just want to know. You don't want the doctor to talk around it, right? Tell me what it is right now. And I thought that was really interesting because I can see in a relationship, give me a little buffer, like be nice to my heart. Okay, then tell me you're done with me, you know? But if it's something about me, my body, physically, something's going on, like I don't want you to have that conversation. Like I want to know.
Is that true for sharing bad news, like someone has passed or things like that? Something's happened.
This was specifically about medical bad news, but we can talk about that. I mean,
I think that there's a connection there. I think that's in the same category.
Yeah, and saying passed away and died, they're the same thing. There may be a gentler message, but like totally beating around the bush about if someone has died is a completely different, like it's that I would go negative on that indirect communication.
And I think it doesn't make sense to do that, because if you're going to lead up to something and then eventually say, oh, and they died, there is no setup for it. I do think the situation matters. Let's talk about when we have a pairing of somebody who's direct with somebody who's indirect, right? Okay. So I think what happens a lot in communication is, let's say I'm the direct person and Meredith is the indirect person. I might focus wrongly on why Meredith isn't more direct. I might say, you know what Meredith's problem is? She's not more like me, essentially, is what I'd be saying. Oh. Meredith might say the same thing about me. Meredith might be like, you know what Dr. K's problem is? She's too rude, or she's too direct, or she's too aggressive with her messages, or whatever. And the problem with those two perspectives is that it focuses on what the other person's doing wrong in our mind's eye, right? And when you and I approach communication that way, we are really thinking about what the other person isn't doing like me. It's a pretty self-centered perspective, because it's like, if you were more like me, you'd be better at communication. That's just not a good perspective to have, right? And so I think that's one starting place. And I think another thing to think about is then what would be the opposite way of thinking about it. And what I would say is something we talked about in the conflict style, which is, it's not really about direct versus indirect. It's really about the distance between those two people.
So think about one breaking this whole thing for me. Yeah.
Right? So listen to all the episodes, everyone.
You full circled the verses in my head. This whole thing in learning about it was direct versus indirect. It's thinking about more the distance between the two of them. It's not a versus.
Right. So let's think about when there's no distance. So I'm with Teighlor. We are talking about our friend that was breaking up with someone, and we both agree that it should be honest, super clear, do it now, don't waste any time, don't add any extra fluff, be honest, don't be rude, but go right in, right? And when Teighlor and I, if we shared the same style, we're going to both be like really supportive of each other and not even be thinking of new ideas. We're just going to insulate ourselves and be like, yeah, and I think that, yeah, and I think that too, exactly, right? And we do this sometimes with our best girlfriends. I mean, that's the thing, right? So I'm not against that, but I'm just saying there's no distance between our two styles, so of course we agree with each other. Now, I might have the same conversation with somebody else. Meredith, I'm picking you as the indirect, sorry. But
That's fine.
When you're the indirect and I'm the direct, let's say you and I have a problem we're facing together. And I'll say, well, we should just go in and, say what's going on. Or we should go in and ask for our money back. Or we should go in and do whatever this direct thing is. You might not agree with that and say, well, no, you got to do it a different way, right? And we have some pretty big distance between our two styles in terms of what we prefer in that moment. And so that's, I think, a very interesting conversation, because what does a direct person expect? They expect people to listen to them, to just say it, to not have real distance between what they think and say. You just say what's on your mind. Like, that's what you do when you're direct. And that's the expectation. So it's not going to be met by someone who is very distant from them. And we could say the opposite's true, where, the indirect communicator or person who favors that might think, oh, I prefer, not having the rough edges come out, right? Or I prefer it not to be so harsh sounding. I prefer it to be a little bit more polite, or just take the edge off it a bit. And so I think that is an interesting thing to kind of think about when we're pairing combinations together, to say, what work do we need to do to bridge that gap? And just because I have a preference doesn't mean I'm right or that it's better. It just means it's my preference.
Just because I have a preference doesn't mean it's right or it's better. I know. That's like growing up, like, lesson. That's welcome to my 30s lesson. Honestly, I felt that in slowing down into 30s. I was talking to somebody about this. I value certain things, like these things are important to me. And then my friend over here values these other things. I need that person to value those things and me to value this thing to make the world. It's good for the world, right? My visual brain thinks of like a symphony or something, or like an orchestra, right? We need the different parts to focus on different areas to function and to make it all work and work well. And that doesn't necessarily mean that distance from the flute player to the tuba player isn't needed or something. I'm just totally nerding out on this, but that's how I'm envisioning what you're saying. Well, it's completely full circling the process and getting ready for this episode. The whole time was like, this is why we should be direct. This is why indirect is wrong.
So I found a list. I found a list in some of our research. I have some suggestions on how direct communicators communicate with indirect communicators. The advice to the direct communicator is avoid blunt comments. Remember that avoiding insults may be seen as more important than providing feedback, which I thought was pretty interesting. Pay attention to your nonverbal behaviors. Recognize that for indirect communicators, it's easier to agree than to disagree. It's easier for an indirect communicator to agree than to disagree, because fundamentally, being indirect, right, would be, if you were disagreeing, you'd be going out of your style preference. So I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah.
And then the tips they had for indirect speakers when communicating with direct speakers would be to recognize that your messages may not be perceived in the way you expect or may not be perceived at all. So too many hedges, hesitations, it might be that there's no message that comes across. And then the other thing for indirect speakers to use with direct speakers is accept that direct communicators respect direct speech. So that's not really a surprise. If you're indirect and you're communicating with someone who values directness, they're going to like it when you're direct.
Yeah, makes sense.
Now, do any of these things go to that larger point we were making earlier, which is evaluate the distance you have to traverse and think about ways you can manage that?
Of like a lot of friendships and wondering, I must come across like pretty harsh to them.
Oh, yeah, you do. Just kidding.
So you're direct. So
I know,
think
I'm
that's
just
why
messing
we
with you. I
like
couldn't
vibe so well.
answer that.
And that's why there's like this comfortability and I think this tension I feel and this uncomfortableness I feel with some of my friends. I'm like, I think it's because they're indirect and I'm direct, and I always feel like I'm stepping on toes and also not getting a clear picture.
But I think it's also good that you don't surround yourself with that same voice, though, and vice versa. They must want your different style of voice in their life for some reason. I have people that are very close to me. I think they're much more indirect than I am. I've learned so much, actually, and I wouldn't have if you were my only friend, Teighlor. So I'm just kidding.
Just think we're probably not surprised. We're all leaning towards the direct communication as to why we do this together.
Not surprised.
Well, culturally, we have some reasons to do it. Our interest in communication relates to it. I mean, there's to be long.
Yeah. Do you have an example, Teighlor, where you feel like direct, clear communication was the winner, for lack of a better word?
Well, yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, everything was very confusing with the people I dated prior to my husband. And we went on a date that by the end of the date, he sat me down and he said, this is the first date. What would you do if you heard this? I like you. I'm interested. You don't need to say anything, but I'm not seeing anyone else. Like, I'm going to exclusively date you. Oh gosh, this guy. It was intimidating on a first date, but I had never in my life had anyone be that direct with me. And it was so refreshing. And clearly he came out the winner because I knew exactly where I stood. And I loved that he said I didn't need to say anything. And I certainly didn't. I was not going to commit at the first date. But being clear, it was just, it put everything at ease for me. And it made it so simple on like where we were going. And then I could either reciprocate or reject. Clarity is kindness. I love it.
I love that.
That's how I got my husband.
That's a good way to wrap. Yeah, that's how I got my husband. See? Listen to this episode for how to get your husband. So good.
Once again, thank you for joining us today. Please remember to rate, share, and subscribe to our podcast. And thank you for listening to Asking for a Friend.
Let us know what you thought of the episode. Our email is hello@afafpodcast.com. This show is for educational purposes only and is copyrighted. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. Thanks for listening to Asking for a Friend with TalkDoc.